During my years in the classroom, my partner teacher and I used to sit around and say that we got to sit around and talk about books with teenagers. Of course, teaching is far more complicated than that, but at the heart of it, that's what we got to do, talk about human stories year after year with young people. Throughout years in the classroom, puzzles began to come together in literature that is discussed over and over. And for example, by my 50th reading of Gilgamesh, I felt a lot different about Gilgamesh than I did on my 5th reading. The patterns, puzzles, and connections within books from human history speak to us at different places in time. And if you reread a book at 15, 25, and 35, the years of tilled earth across that life make the experience of revisiting a text so rich, so rewarding, and new. Any teacher who has taught a book many times knows this sensation, and all listeners who have reread their favorite book multiple times probably know exactly what I'm talking about. With that in mind, I was delighted to get a new book in the mail by Dean Sluyter, called The Dharma Bum's Guide to Western Literature, Finding Nirvana in the Classics. The book is out now from New World Library. Dean Sluyter is an author, meditation teacher, and he taught for 33 years at the Pingry School in New Jersey, where he taught 10th grade English and also an elective called The Literature of Enlightenment. Dean's new book, The Dharma Bum's Guide to Western Literature, examines the ways mindfulness, haiku, and Dharma teachings are present in works by Mark Twain, Virginia Woolf, Toni Morrison, Frederick Douglass, Emily Dickinson, J.D. Salinger, William Blake, and many more. This book is the cumulative effect of decades of talking with teenagers during school and then spending the summers leading and going on meditation retreats. After coming back to school from summers on retreat, Dean began to put together new connections in the books that he was reading with his students, and this book began to take shape. This book could easily be a supplementary textbook for literature courses at the secondary and post-secondary levels because the chapters contain phenomenal snippets from Shakespeare, Keats, Whitman, Rogers, and Hammerstein and Melville, and then blows the doors open with Dean's unique views from years of meditation practice and teaching. It's super interesting, and I think that you will really love what Dean has to say. This conversation was absolutely lovely because Dean and I got into the fabulous depths of what we love about being teachers and the book. You can find Dean's work at deansluyter.com, and you can find Dharma Bum's Guide to Western Literature out now from New World Library. Thank you so much for listening. Dean Sluyter, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks so much, Greg. It's really great to be here.
I'm delighted that you're here, and I'm wondering if we can just kick it off by having you introduce yourself a little bit to all the listeners out there who may not know who you are and what you do.
Well, my name is Dean Sluyter. It's spelled funny. It's got a U in the middle of it.
I love it how the back of the book says the pronunciation.
Yeah. When you go through life with a living in America with a Dutch name, and you hear all kinds of entertaining variations on it. So this is, yes, my one chance to get people to get it right. So yeah, I'm Dean Sluyter. I'm a teacher. I've been teaching meditation my whole adult life. For 33 years, I taught English and ran meditation programs at the Pingry School, a very fine prep school in New Jersey. And I write books, and recently published my 6th book, The Dharma Bum's Guide to Western Literature.
Wonderful. We're going to get into all that. I want to start off by talking about teaching a little bit, because I feel like the foundation of the book is kind of rooted in your years in the classroom in a lot of ways. And so as an English and history teacher and world religions teacher myself, I kind of want to know more about your teaching experience. And you already said kind of where you taught, but I'm just like wondering if you can just kind of tell me about what your career was like a little bit, some like courses you taught over the years, and some of your favorite stuff to do with teenagers like throughout your career. I'm just like really curious to hear some teaching stories to kick us off today.
Yeah, good. No, I love talking about this
Yeah.
stuff. I mean, I was so fortunate. In 1976, I had been an itinerant meditation teacher for some years, and before that, I'd just been basically an itinerant hippie hitchhiking around the country, and I was now what 27 years old and had met a woman I was interested in, and the whole idea of maybe starting a family was starting to get interesting. But that meant I needed a day job.
Hmm.
Um, and a friend of mine was in the English department at the Pingry School, and they got an opening in the middle of the year. A new teacher who'd started in September made
Hmm.
it to the Christmas break, wrote to the department head, said, "The kids have driven me crazy. I'm not coming back." So they were doing interviews in January, and I was the least qualified person who interviewed. All these people had classroom experience,
Hmm.
all these they had PhDs, but my friend had a hunch I would be a good teacher. So he went around very quietly sabotaging the other applications. and
Nice.
and and I was actually just supposed to finish out the year from February till June, and yada yada yada. I was there for 33 years.
What an interesting approach to the classroom, too. Do you think that that was like a benefit, like kind of not being explicitly trained to be like, well, you're going through our education program to train you? You kind of had like, must have had like a pretty open approach and open mind to like how to go about being a teacher.
Well, it was benefit. What was beneficial about it was that I was thrown into the water with no time to prepare.
Hmm.
I and there were holes in my reading. I mean, so not having the summer to prepare to read the books, it was just, and I was constantly trying to keep up with marking papers and so
Yeah.
forth. And so it was, okay, Dean, tomorrow you're going to be teaching the Canterbury Tales. I had never read the Canterbury Tales.
Hmm.
So I would run upstairs to the stacks of the library, pull out 4 or 5 books of Chaucer criticism, and just start thumbing through. And this was a big discovery for me, was that somehow I would get an intuitive grasp of what was going on.
Yeah.
I would pick up a phrase from here, a phrase from here, and then go, okay, I got it. I got enough to go into the classroom. And I had enough kind of, I don't know, showbiz instincts to know that no, with the Canterbury Tales, you don't start at the beginning because then you're going to lose them. Go straight to the dirty ones.
Mm.
Right, you go straight to the Miller's Tale
Yeah.
with all the crazy sex farce and the fart jokes and
Yeah.
so forth, and make people laugh, keep people engaged, and keep it rooted to their real life experience. And meanwhile, keep tap dancing and stay one chapter ahead of the kids, and you're okay.
Nice. Well, I'm wondering about in your decades of teaching, what some of your favorite titles are to talk about with students. Like as a teacher myself, like I'm thinking about like Othello or like A Small Place by Jamaica Kincaid, some of the ones that like I loved teaching.
Mm.
And like even though like the things would change from year to year, I was thinking about the things that I was like really always looking forward to doing with the students. And I'm wondering what some of those titles are for you.
Yeah, well, I taught English 10th grade English
Me too.
for almost my whole career. And I have to say, that was just about my favorite grade to teach. I loved teaching at least 10th graders at Pingry who were probably, a year and a half more academically mature than kids at the same grade level at a lot of other schools.
Hmm.
And what I found was at that age, kind of ninth grade, they're really starting to think conceptually.
Yeah.
By 10th grade, they're comfortable with thinking conceptually, but they haven't gotten jaded yet. By the
Hmm.
time they're in 11th grade and 12th grade, they're really getting preoccupied with other things,
Yeah.
and they may be getting like too cool to get excited. So 10th grade to me was just really that sweet spot. And the so we read Macbeth every year. We
Yeah.
spent about a month on Macbeth, which was great. We read probably, if I had to pick one that I just look forward to teaching every
Yeah.
year, it was Salinger's 9 Stories.
Cool.
They are so beautiful, They are so revelatory of human psyche, human behavior, the highs and lows of human beings. Plus, they open the window to higher spiritual aspirations, Dharma aspirations that Salinger gets deeper into in his later books. And they're such masterpieces of literary construction. Each of those 9 stories is just like a little gem,
Mm.
and you could spend a whole week, but because of time pressures, we would spend a whole day on each story, and just to see how all the gears and levers of literary technique work there was just, and to see kids getting it, because it's written on a level, even though it's just high artistry. It's on a level that a smart 10th grader can see. They can get it.
Awesome. Well, we're going to bring Salinger back into the conversation here. I feel like that's a really nice segue into the book, which you have just put out from my longtime friends at New World Library, who have been supporting my podcast work for several years at this point. But the book, as you said earlier, is The Dharma Bum's Guide to Western Literature, Finding Nirvana in the Classics. And I'm curious about the origin of this book, how you went about planning it out. If it was like before you were leaving the classroom, if you were thinking about this, if it was after. I'm curious about how the vision for this book began to sprout in your mind.
Well, the vision started to sprout because of my essentially my double life,
Mm-hmm.
which was that from September till June, I was in the classroom. I was teaching literature, and coming back, a whole lot of what was in my syllabus did not change. So I got to come back every year and teach Huckleberry Finn again, come
Mm-hmm.
back every year and teach Great Gatsby to my 11th grade American Lit course again. And
Mm-hmm.
unless you're completely phoning it in, you keep getting deeper into these works. You
For
keep
sure.
seeing things you hadn't seen before. And then in my case, in the summers and Christmas breaks, I'm off on meditation retreats. I'm sitting with my teachers, with the lamas and the rishis. And so the connections started to be made. And really, this book was gestating for 45 years. I'm not sure
Wow.
at what point I realized, oh, this needs to be a book, but I was starting to see the connections. I was starting to see how when Huck, when Huckleberry Finn manages to escape from the genteel Christian lady on the one bank of the Mississippi who's trying to civilize him, and
Mm-hmm.
then on the other bank of the river, his brutal, bigoted, alcoholic father who's going to kill him, and
Yeah.
then he goes down the river, right, which is and then I saw, oh, wait a minute, that's the Buddha's golden middle way between
Mm.
too tight and too loose. Has anyone else seen that? Has anyone else commented on that? And then when Huck first escapes, he gets into a salvaged canoe, and there's this beautiful description that I have in the book of how he's he finally, after the hectic scramble to escape from his father, he lies on his back in the bottom of the canoe. He says, and I just let her float. And
Mm.
I got out amongst the driftwood and just let her float, and I had a good rest and a good smoke from my pipe, and looking up into the sky and the moonlight, not a cloud in it. The sky looks ever so deep when you lay on your back in the moonshine. And
Mm.
I went and I went, A, my God, that's so beautiful.
Yeah.
It's such a beautiful human experience. B, such beautiful, simple, straightforward writing. And C, this is the baptism into the transcendent.
Yeah.
This is quite literally what had been practicing with my Tibetan teachers, a technique called Namkai Naljor, which translates as sky gazing meditation, where you literally gaze open eyed into the ever so deep sky and lose yourself in it.
Oh my
So
gosh.
yeah, that's exactly. I kept having these oh my gosh experiences over and
Yeah.
over, and at some point I realized, well, that needs to be a book.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I'm a Missouri boy, so I grew up in St. Louis
Ah,
looking at that river that you're talking about
uh-huh.
all the time. Like I would like go to baseball games, I would go to Hannibal, like where the Mark Twain boyhood home was. And so everything that you were just saying, I was like transported back to like being a young kid and going to like Mark Twain's boyhood home for like a field trip for like my elementary school, you know?
Yes.
You
No,
just transported me back in
I've
time.
been there a couple of times, and that's a sacred pilgrimage for me.
You know, speaking of childhood, you write movingly about your own in the introduction of the book. You talk about your first gurus, and you've talked a little bit about your spiritual practice here in the last several minutes. So feel free to keep bringing those examples in because it's continuously fascinating to root you within the book itself. But I'm wondering if you can just say a little bit about those first gurus in your life because I found that section to be very endearing and also very fun.
Oh, good. When I write a book, the the kind of the key moment for me is finding the first sentence.
Mm-hmm.
Once I find the first sentence, somehow I'm good. I'm off to the races. For instance, I wrote a book in 2005 called Cinema Nirvana: Enlightenment Lessons from the Movies, and my first sentence in that one is Tibetan temples smell like popcorn. Right, which is literally true. I'm not making
Cool.
that up. And the first sentence of the Dharma Bum's guide is, I found my first guru on the cover of Mad Magazine.
Mm-hmm.
So then I go on to tell this story, how it was 1961. I was 11 or 12 years old. My mom had sent me out to the garage because we were going to be going to a drive-in movie that night.
Mm-hmm.
It's a thing that they had in my childhood, young whippersnapper. I don't think you know
Yeah,
about those.
there's a few on like 6 miles away. It's
Really?
the transit drive-in theater here in Buffalo, New York. Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
That's great. Um, and so I went out to the Nash Rambler station wagon to clear away all the comic books and toys that my brothers and I had left there. And my mind was churning, which it was even at that early age. It was at that time in the habit of just kind of this anxious churning going on all the time. But I was so in the middle of that churning, I didn't realize it was churning. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't realize it was anxiety. It just felt like, oh, this is what it's like to get up in the morning and go through the day. So I'm in the middle of all this churning, and I'm blah, 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 goes the mind. I'm picking up comic books. The next one I pick up is a Mad Magazine. There on the cover is their mascot, as always, Alfred E. Newman, with his gap teeth and his idiot grin. And his motto, "What? Me worry?"
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, my time stopped, my mind stopped, the world stopped, everything stopped. And what I happened was I realized that this churning, this anxiety was called worry, that it was not being done to me, that I was doing it, that engine was revving constantly because I had my foot on the gas pedal.
Mm.
And once I saw that, I was able to take my foot off the gas pedal and everything went quiet. And I went into what I later understood a few years later when I started reading Eastern texts. I went into a full-blown experience of samadhi, satori, where really what it felt like was, oh, gee, the top of my head has been taken off and I've
Yeah.
merged with the sky. It may sound woo-woo, but I can't help it. That was my experience.
Well, and then you tied that into an Emily Dickinson saying somewhere along the
Yes.
line, didn't you?
Yes, yes. So then the very exciting discovery for me was the line from Emily Dickinson in a letter that she wrote, where she said, "When I feel physically as if the top of my head were taken off, I know that is poetry."
Mm.
I went, oh, okay, that is poetry, and taking it, more broadly, that is literature doing what literature is supposed to do. It does what meditation does. It's supposed to induce samadhi, nirvana. So that, in the subtitle of my book, when I say finding nirvana in the classics, so it's finding the insights, finding the understanding, finding the, sometimes symbolic representation of nirvana. But on a good day, it's the reader finding the direct experience of nirvana, by reading those books.
And then like you and your like decades in the classroom, you get to see that happen. Maybe not every day, maybe not even every week, but like, every once in a while you get to see those experiences on the faces of teenagers who are like in these extremely formative years. And you get to be like, bam, there it is.
There it is. Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, it's so great to be talking with a fellow teacher because you know what keeps us addicted.
Absolutely. I mean, it's like not the most well-paid profession. It's very hard work. There's so much grading, which as you mentioned in the book is not all that fun.
No.
But you get those moments that kind of keep you coming back, be like, yeah, that was a good day today. I saw that
Yeah.
moment several times today, and I'll be back tomorrow for see if I can make that happen again. It's
Ex-
just a
ex-
really inspiring thing.
Exactly. I found that every aspect of the job outside of the classroom, marking papers, going to department meetings, just got worse and worse
Yeah.
as the years went on, and being in the classroom got better and better.
Yeah, I actually totally agree with that. Like sitting in those like wooden chairs, like in like faculty meetings, like it would
Uh,
always make my back hurt. It would make my knees hurt. And I would be sitting there just in a terrible mood. But then I'd be in the classroom and I'd be like, all right, forget all that stuff. I'm here in the moment now with all these groups of people and we're going to rock this, regardless of how I feel about that meeting 20 minutes ago.
Right. And what I found in the classroom was not only the kids were getting the tops of their heads blown off, but I was getting the top of my head blown off in the you know how athletes talk about being in the zone,
Right.
and
Flow
that's
state.
not only for playing sports, but for you can see it with jazz musicians,
Yeah.
and rock musicians. You can feel when they drop into the zone, and then it is all just frictionless flow. It's all coming from somewhere else, and the same thing would happen to me, and it still happens to me in the kind of teaching that I do now, where you don't have to think about it anymore, where it's like you and the kids, you're in this flow, and the somehow the flow is bigger than any of you. Sometimes in the middle of that I would look over toward the window and I would see my reflection, and I used to sit perched on the edge of my desk,
Yeah.
and I would look over at the window and I'd see my I'll say, quote, my reflection. More accurate to say the reflection of my body.
Right.
And I would find myself thinking, oh, is that thing still hanging around here? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love it. I mean, like something that I was curious about is like I like to pay tribute to one of my most important mentors, George Frizzell, who kind of like inspired me to like, teach about world religions in schools.
Mm.
And also he's kind of like the reason why this whole podcast that I do exists. And you mentioned a teacher, John Fresius, who you
Yes.
had when you were a kid. And I'm wondering if you can tell me about this teacher who seems like such a character in the book, and it's just his story needs to be told here, I feel like.
Yes, indeed. No, John Fresius was my second guru, and I'm going to read this from the
Go for it.
because one thing about writing is you get to hammer away at these sentences, and you get them as good as you can get them. He was a genuine. Yes, John Fresius, my English teacher at Van Nuys High School, showed me that words could open into fathomless depths. He was a genuine wild man with a big gut, a prematurely gray crew cut, and a serious drinker's flushed complexion. He wore cheap white dress shirts with 2 breast pockets and a pack of tarry tins in each, always. He was copious in his profanity and ferocious in his skewering of hypocrites. Local ministers had pressured the school board more than once to fire him, but having gone straight from high school into combat in World War II, he was not easily intimidated. He had a trove of bad jokes and outdated slang that he repeated ritualistically. He called himself Uncle John, alluded often to his crush on the screen goddess Hedy Lamarr, here he gave a wolf whistle, and responded to any goopy sentimentality with, "I almost tossed my cookies." When you gave a good answer, he shouted, "Exactly!" When you gave a bad answer, he shook his big head till his jowls flapped. Mr. Fresius was driven to convey the astonishing power of words to express the joys and sorrows of human life. He was in his full glory when reading poetry aloud, his soaring Laurence Olivier elocution punctuated by Groucho Marx asides. When reading, say, a grim sonnet by Keats, dying at 25, burning with hopeless love and lust, he would look up with wide-eyed anguish that sharpened a moment later into a glare, a silent accusation that we'd insufficiently appreciated the doomed poet's tragedy. Then he'd growl, "That's rougher than a damned cob." When he reached the end of a poem, he would say, "Okay, let's take our shoes off and run through it." Then go back to the beginning and unpack it, phrase by phrase, revealing all the subtle gears and levers of poetic technique, occasionally pausing to mutter, "God damn, that's good."
Tell me about "Let's Take Our Shoes Off" and what that has come to mean to you in the years since he originally said that, because that occurs in the book a couple times. And
yeah, so what happened was when I got thrown into the deep end, and suddenly, okay, tomorrow, Dean, you're going to be a high school teacher. I said, I'll just do what Uncle John did. He's the guy that inspired me. And I actually, my whole 33 years there, I refer to myself shamelessly as Uncle Dean.
Nice.
And when I would read a poem and then we'd get ready to explicate it, I could not do it without first saying, "Okay, let's take our shoes off and run through it."
Nice. How did the kids react to that?
Oh, it was great. Some of my dearest friends are former students of mine, and some of them still call me Uncle Dean. And
Nice.
It's quite lovely. And some of them have gone on to become serious writers, book writers. I got one guy who's a staff writer for the New Yorker.
Cool.
Another one who's an investigative reporter, a fearless investigative reporter. One great moment, another favorite book of mine to teach my 10th graders was Waiting for Godot. After all the other English 10 teachers stopped teaching it, I insisted on continuing, and they said, and I talk about this in the book. They said, "But it drives the kids crazy." I said, "Exactly,
yeah,
right. That means it's working." One of my students was a brilliant young man named Buzzy Cohen, who now we fast forward to 2019. He is a returning winner on Jeopardy! I'm sitting in the studio audience over here in Culver City. He's in the semifinals of the Jeopardy! Tournament of Champions. And he's about to be eliminated. They get to Final Jeopardy! He's about to lose it all. And the question that they ask, the answer is, "What is Waiting for Godot?"
Oh my gosh.
And he wins on that.
Wow.
Goes on the next day to win the finals and $250,000.
Oh my gosh.
And you know the part in the after the first commercial where Alex would come to each contestant and chat with them for a minute. And so when Alex got to him on the Friday show, which actually they do a whole week's worth of taping in one day, and Alex goes backstage and changes his suit and his tie. So he said to Buzzy, so yesterday when you pulled it out in Final Jeopardy! With Waiting for Godot, there was a person in the audience who was especially happy. Who was that? And Buzzy said, "Well, my 10th grade English teacher, who I read that book, and Dean Sluyter, he's there." And they actually put the camera on me, and Alex did a little pranam to me and said, "Way to go, teacher."
Nice.
Now, come on, that is like just an ultimate dream for a teacher.
There's nothing better than that. That's where the real benefits of teaching come in. Like a lot of careers, like the real benefits come in with cash or like the vacation policies or whatever, like what kind of benefits you get in that career. But like the teaching, like there's so many of those kinds of moments that's where the real magic lies and what makes it a special profession that people can stay in for multiple decades,
Yeah. Yep.
Let's talk a little bit more about the content in the book here. You have a wide variety of texts and authors that you feature in this book, from Virginia Woolf to Frederick Douglass to F. Scott Fitzgerald, J.D. Salinger, Samuel Beckett, Toni Morrison. I'm wondering how you landed on the ones that made it into the book as well.
Hmm. Well, my basic principle was I want to write about the stuff that I'm excited about. I
Mm-hmm.
want to, so a lot of the texts that I write about were ones that I taught for years and years. So I taught Frederick Douglass's slave narrative for years and years. I taught Macbeth, Huckleberry Finn, The Great Gatsby, and I could not wait to share my insights into those. And then the next exciting part was when the magic that happens on a good day when you're writing, when you go into the zone in your writing, and you think you know where all the bodies are buried in Huckleberry Finn after all those decades, and then you start seeing more stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like, whoa, where did that insight come from? So that's where a lot of them came from. And then, there's a certain amount of balance. I mean, I'm very excited about Shakespeare. My original concept for the book said, okay, I've got to have one tragedy, one Shakespeare tragedy, one Shakespeare comedy, one Shakespeare history play. But then I realized that that was going to be a 1,000-page book. I couldn't do that. So, there's a certain amount of balance between, and the sequence of it. Working with my editor, Jason Gardner, the executive editor at New World Library, who is just wonderful. His eye, his intuition for recognizing all my best impulses and encouraging them, and recognizing my really bad impulses, and gently talking me down from them. He was just really invaluable. So in our process, there was also then, okay, what's the sequence? And I thought about it, the sequencing, my sort of model that I aspired to was a Beatles album.
Mm.
The sequencing of the tracks. There's to a certain degree, you can get, okay, you start with something that's exciting and up tempo, then you go to a ballad, but then there's more subtle aspects of the sequence that you can't even explain, but you just feel, no, the overall rhythm, the overall arc is just right. And then my secret weapon is my wife, Yaffa Lerea, who is a longtime documentary film editor and actually now producer. So her sense of arc and rhythm is just one of my earlier books. Because everything that I write, I have to read to her out loud,
Mm-hmm.
and that's crucial.
If it doesn't sound good coming out of your mouth, it doesn't sound good reading it silently on the page.
I used to say this every year in my English classes on the first day. I would say, look, there's a lot of things you're going to learn this year. You're going to learn things about the life of Shakespeare that'll knock your socks off. You're going to learn how to use a semicolon, which will make you officially a literate person. But the most important thing you're going to learn all year, I'm going to tell you right now, everything you write, you must read out loud.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Yeah,
I love it. I mean,
yeah,
it's essential. And I mean, because if it doesn't sound good on coming out of your mouth, it doesn't sound good on the page either. And like, I would use that as like a writer's workshop kind of activity where the students would read stuff to each other. And
yeah.
then their listening partner would highlight stuff that doesn't sound good coming out of the person's mouth. And then be like,
Right.
and then they would discuss, how can we make it sound better coming out of my mouth? And that was like kind of like our peer review activity exercise that I love doing.
And
Um,
the thing for me that actually kind of intensified that effect was when I started moonlighting narrating audiobooks,
oh, cool.
other people's as well as my own, and that got me really even. I thought I was tuned in to using the auditory brain circuits
Yeah.
tuned into my writing, but that really got me tuned in. It really improved my writing. But oh yes, so reading one of my previous books, I was reading it out loud, the manuscript to my wife, and I get to a sentence in the middle of the book, and she said, "That's the beginning of your book."
Oh, interesting.
I said, "Really?" And I looked at it and went, "Wow, you're right." and that made the book work.
Cool.
That sense of structure.
Nice.
Yeah.
I was reading it last night as I was before I was going to sleep, and I was reading your JD Salinger and Holden Caulfield chapter, and I have this lifelong bias of Caulfield as kind of like a jerky little entitled brat, like in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And after decades of your chapter's helping me kind of reframe and complicate the character of Holden in my own mind, because I've thought this for years, and I have this like inexplicable bias against Holden that I probably can't even defend anymore at this point in my life. But I'm wondering about if you can reflect on maybe like the perception that Holden is kind of unlikable to a lot of people, and then kind of like what you feel like your chapter does well to kind of complicate that.
Funny, I never my where I'm coming from was so different. I've never thought about Holden as unlikable.
I know, and like I
That's a new
can't
read
even
for me.
defend it. It's just that like I think that there's a notion today in the very fast-paced society that we live in, like the perception of some of these like historical literary figures kind of like change as we get
Mm-hmm.
further and further into the future, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of had this bias of Holden as just kind of like this like rich little entitled kid. And your chapter was kind of complicating that for me, and I was just
Good,
wondering what you thought about that.
good. Yeah, I mean, privileged upper middle class white kids have problems too.
Yeah.
We're all look. We're all just trying to be happy and not suffer.
Yeah.
It really comes down to that. One of the reasons that I start the book with William Blake
Mm-hmm.
is that he, in such elegant, luminous, but simple language, he expresses that. When he writes, "Ah, sunflower, weary of time, who countest the steps of the sun, seeking after that sweet golden clime where the traveler's journey is done," right? That's all of us. We are all the weary sunflower, right? Weary of, and I explain in the book, the sunflower is heliotropic. It physically follows the sun as it crosses the sky. So that's all of us. Just that yearning for satisfaction, yearning for happiness, yearning for, we know there's got to be something more than just, okay, stuff happens, and then you die. That bigger thing. And Holden, to me, represents what one of my teachers, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, who I studied with way back in the 70s, what he used to call the restlessness of the seeker. That is, you're in that situation where there's got to be something more, but you don't know what it is.
Yeah.
So you wind up just condemning everything, cutting down everything that is. So yeah, actually now I can see this is why Holden could look unlikable. Actually, his sister Phoebe, in the key scene, she busts him for this near the end of the book, where he's going off on his, as usual, condemning everyone for being phony, and
Yeah.
and she just looks at him and says, "You don't like anything.
Mm.
You don't like anything," and he kind of. That's the beginning of the wake-up call for him, to seeing that he's just projecting the toxicity of his own depression and anxiety on everything else. That he's not seeing. He's seeing, in a sense, he's seeing himself as a weary, yearning sunflower, but he's not seeing that everyone else is also.
Oh, that's okay. That makes a lot of sense to me. And because I was reading this last night, I was like, wow, I think I like Holden a lot more than I've allowed myself to think in the
Right.
last several years.
Mm-hmm.
And in the book, it says, I like it when somebody gets excited about something. And I entirely agree. Cause like I've heard people say in the past, like whenever somebody says I'm bored, the response to that is, well, boring people are bored. Because if you're just like focusing on what bores you, that means you're not focusing on what is there and what can excite you if you allow yourself to become excited. And I agree entirely. And I'm wondering if you can tell me, you've mentioned several chapters, but like what chapters are you like most proud of? Is there like anything that like where you really had some like powerful moments where you when you finish a chapter you're like, wow, this is a powerful personal growth for me in these particular chapters? Do you have any examples of that where you're just like
Yeah.
totally in love with it?
Yeah. First, before I forget, let me mention about this point about boredom. There's a
Yeah.
great quote. Ram Dass. Ram Dass once said, "Boredom is just lack of attention."
Hmm. I agree.
Right,
Yeah, that's
right,
really cool.
right. And I would add, because God don't make no junk.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Getting back to Blake for a moment, where Blake said, you throw this. Um, wait, let me get this right. You throw the sand against the wind, and the wind blows it back again, and every sand becomes a gem reflected in the beams divine.
Mm.
That's describing having sand blow into your eyes.
Yeah.
Which us is just, ugh, ugh, ugh. And
Yeah.
to him, it's like, whoa, check this out. It's he's seeing the divine everywhere. Now that's what the Dharma really is about. The Dharma enlightenment is seeing, is waking up and seeing that, gee, this whole idea that all this stuff was just stuff. That was a bad dream. All this
Mm.
stuff is the light pervades the stuff. The stuff is all the light of the infinite. That the infinite, if it's infinite, it's got to be everywhere. Otherwise,
Mm.
it ain't infinite. And so that means every little drop of the finite, if you're paying attention, and as Ram Dass would say, it's all just wow.
Mm.
Now, so to your question, first, I will confess that more than one of these chapters, by the time I got to the end, reading it to Yaffa, sitting out on the little couch outside in our lovely little garden in the back with the hummingbirds flying around, I would be weeping by the end. That I would be moved, so moved, first of all, by the writers that I was having the privilege to write about,
Mm.
and by the fact that I really had been able to, I felt, capture, in about 15 pages, capture something about them, that something had come through me, and that, standing there at the keyboard, getting into the zone, something had come through that bigger than I thought could ever come through me, and better, that it was just, it was often very moving. But if I had to pick one, I think it would be my chapter on Emily Dickinson. Just something about the flow of it, the rhythm of it, the which of her poems and lines of poems I just somehow got into the swing, and it kind of into the music, and knew, okay, talk about this, now move to this, now move to this, and there's a particular, I don't want to talk about this now. I'll save this for the reader,
Yeah. Yeah.
but the particular moment of her actual life that it ends on was just, every time I read that part, I'm just so moved.
Fabulous. Uh, Dean, you're making me feel like I want to read more.
Good.
I'm feeling my failures right now in the ways that I've let some of my formerly extremely disciplined reading routines kind of fall by the wayside in the last couple of years. So I'm feeling very inspired to pick up that novel that I'm 30% of the way into tonight instead of turn on HBO Max.
I love it. I love it. Yeah,
This
this is again, this is a thing as that we love to hear as teachers. Oh,
yeah.
you inspired me to read. It happened to me as well. I tell the story in the book because I knew I had to have a chapter on Moby Dick,
Mm-hmm.
because it's Moby Dick, and I start with the story how for 33 years. every year with my American Lit class, we would never read it because it's too long. We would read one of his stories, usually Bartleby the Scrivener. But I would spend a day talking about Moby Dick and how great it was. It's a great American novel. You got to read this thing before you die. And in my book now, I make the confession, all that time I had never read it.
I haven't read it.
I was faking it. And that finally, in the writing of this book, my karma caught up with me. I had to read all 700 odd pages of it. The good news is it turned out that I was not a liar, that it turns out it is as incredibly great as I had been saying. And more than that, that it's also really funny. I had not expected that. Moby Dick is hilarious, and it's also really weird.
Yeah,
I mean,
I've heard it's weird.
It's very weird.
Yeah. The only way that I think I could get through it is if I had a hard copy of the book and the audiobook in headphones, and I had like blocked out the world, and I allowed the audiobook reader to pace me through it as I read it on the page.
Yeah.
I feel like that would keep me moving forward instead of like doom spiral in my brain and like become distracted and like be like, I'll never finish this, and then slam it shut and walk away out of despair.
Yeah. No, I actually used audiobook to help me through some of the chapters as well.
Awesome. I love that when you use the tools that are available to you. It's pure teaching. I'm wondering.
Go ahead.
I'm wondering if there's any authors or chapters that you were drafting that like didn't make the cut, or like people that like you were thinking about including that didn't quite get in the book itself.
Yeah, we were starting. I wound up writing a longer book, the form that it wound up being published in was longer than it was supposed to be. My contract called for a shorter book, but there was just so much that I wanted to do. And when I finally sent the manuscript to Jason, and when he first received it, he got a note. He said, "Okay, looking forward to reading this, and just know, we'll probably have to." Cut, a couple of chapters. And so I'm going, oh, this is like Sophie's Choice,
Yeah.
which of my darling children am I going to send off to the camps? And God bless him. He finished reading the manuscript, and Jason wrote me back. He said, there's nothing here that I'm even tempted to cut. Oh, God, that just made me so happy. But yeah, as I said before, I wanted to do more Shakespeare. The first three words of my title, the Dharma Bums, of course, comes from Jack Kerouac.
Yeah.
And it would seem logical that I would have a chapter on Kerouac, and I was planning it, but I wound up not doing it. And I have a little note. I note it in the last chapter. I have a paragraph or two. And what I said was, I'm leaving you on your own with Jack Kerouac. Kerouac lived and wrote such a hopped-up mix of revelation and commotion, of luminous joy and baffled joyride, that it's probably best to jump right into On the Road or The Dharma Bums or Visions of Gerard without anyone trying to sort it out for you. Let Jack be Jack. But I've felt his spirit hitchhiking its way through this book. Most of the writers here lived some version of Kerouac's beat-up, beatific adventure, dancing or stumbling their way to what he called a plank where all the angels dove off and flew into infinity.
The omission of the lack of a Kerouac chapter caught my attention as well, because he also is the quote on the very beginning of the book. There's lots of keys, but only one door.
Yeah.
Really
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
Dean, as a podcaster, I'm always intrigued by people's forays into this medium. And I watched your interview with one of your interviews with Michael Imperioli and one with David Lynch.
Yes.
And I'm wondering if you can just maybe spend a moment and promote your podcast that you've done and talk to people a little bit about what you do over there. Cause I feel like that might be connected to one of your earlier books where you were talking about film too.
Yes. So my dear friend since childhood, Christopher Bush, and I co-host a podcast called The Filmosophers.
Mm-hmm.
where we talk about movies and try to take a kind of deeper dive into movies and the creative process behind them. And one of our interviews was with David Lynch, who was
Amazing.
amazing and hilarious.
Yeah.
My favorite moment in that interview was when I coughed and I kind of got caught in a spasmodic cough a couple of times.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my first thought was, well, we'll have to cut that. And David Lynch immediately says, "Oh, that's such an interesting sound. I want to
Nice.
record that. I can do something with that." And and I thought, wow, there it is. That's the creative mind at work. Like we're turning other people's garbage, other people's outtakes into art.
Yeah. I love it. That's a really cool show. Are you, because I noticed you haven't done one in a while. Is the podcast sort of on a hiatus at the moment? Are you coming back for more?
I just when I get a call from Chris, he really does all the
Oh,
booking,
cool.
everything. I just kind of show up. So you'd have to ask him.
I love it.
But yeah, Mike. But also interviewing Michael Imperioli, and most people know him as an actor. They know him as Christopher on The Sopranos and Spider in Goodfellas.
Yeah.
Uh, uh, a lot of people don't know that he's also a very serious writer, director, and a practitioner of Vajrayana Buddhism, Tibetan
Cool.
Buddhism. So yeah, he was great. We had a really deep talk. So yeah, the podcast is called The Filmosophers. You can find all of our episodes on thefilmosophers.com or on YouTube.
I love it. Well, Dean, to bring us in for a landing today, I'm wondering if you can maybe tell us a little bit about what is next for you and also where people can find you if they want to know more about your work.
Yeah, so what's next for me is right now, as we're recording this in May of 2022, we're starting to crawl out of quarantine,
Yeah.
and the last few weeks, I've done my first few live in-person workshops and teaching events in a couple of years, and it's great. I
Yeah.
love doing this stuff. So I'm looking forward to doing more of that. And I do have the seeds of the next book, but I can't talk about that at this
Yeah.
point. It's too
It's a
delicate.
seed.
Yeah, it's the seed. You don't keep digging up the seed to look at it. You have to
Yeah.
let it germinate at this point. People can find me, the two good places to find me are my website, deanslyter.com. Getting back to the difficult spelling, it's Sluyter. Just remember UY as in buy or guy. Buy this guy a beer. So Dean Sluyter, SLUYTER.com. Also, if you just remember, easier to remember the title of my book, and you Google that, and you'll find your way to me. Also, I have a YouTube channel where I've been archiving a lot of sessions or excerpts from sessions since quarantine started. I've been 2-3 times a week leading meditation and discussions over Zoom. And by the way, these are free and open to everyone. So if people come to my website, they can sign up to get on the mailing list, and then they'll get the Zoom invitation to join these discussions. The main thing that I want to mention here quickly about meditation, because this is a big passion in my life, has been showing people that meditation is not what they thought.
Yeah.
When people say, "Oh, I tried to meditate, but it was hard," that means that they were trying to flatten out all the waves of thinking and perceiving and feeling on the surface of the ocean of awareness. And that's an impossible task. That's a game of whack-a-mole that you can't win. That's
Yeah.
why people think meditation is hard. But instead, if you allow gravity to pull you down a couple feet below the surface, you discover that, oh, the water down here is and always has been silent underneath the surface level where the turbulence is. And so what actually turns out to be the most effective approach to meditation is effortlessness. effortlessness. And so that's how I lead meditation on these sessions, which people can join in real time on via Zoom, or they can see them archived on YouTube.
I kind of want to join one of your meditations now.
Please do. Please do. I'd love to see you there.
I'll email you later.
Yeah, good.
Dean Sluyter, author, The Dharma Bum's Guide to Western Literature, Finding Nirvana in the Classics, out now from New World Library. Great book. I have loved reading it and chatting with you about it. And our wonderful subplot of English teacher nerd out time has been extremely rewarding and fulfilling for me. So I just want to thank you sincerely for joining me here today to talk about this wonderful book and your many hats in the world. It's just been a real pleasure.
Pleasure for me. Thank you so much, Greg.